entire world is created in a way that you're not just a fan of the band, you're a member of their club, you're in their gang.
It's about the image and the attitude and the show that people get, and that's what keeps them coming back.
Their live shows have been consistently brilliant throughout the decades, and that's given them a loyal, large fan base.
There's Kiss Everything. The music became less important than the live spectacle, and most importantly, the image.
They have probably the most recognisable and iconic outfits in the history of rock and roll music.
They will never age. They will always be that iconic look.
Gene Simmons, Chaim Witz, was born in Haifa, which is a port in Israel, very much the Ellis Island of Israel, where a lot of Holocaust refugees came just after the war. And included in those was Gene Simmons' mother, Florence, and his father, who was a carpenter. And they settled in Israel for a while because they came from Hungary, where they'd survived the Holocaust. And then eventually, young Chaim and his mum moved to Jackson Heights in New York.
He had a very, very tragic background, and he often says that's one of the reasons why he loves America so much, because America, gave him safe passage and got involved in the war, and for those reasons he's, extremely patriotic.
He changed his name to Eugene Klein, actually, when they were in the States. And it's a common theme, actually, in Kiss, sort of trying to leave their roots behind, in a sense. He was practicing guitar as well for hours and hours, and he was also an assistant at Vogue magazine for a little bit, bizarrely enough.
Paul Stanley, who Stanley Eisen, to give him his birth name, he was also the child of Holocaust survivors too. They moved to New York, to a much more Jewish area, to a place called Kew Gardens.
Paul Stanley was born in Manhattan, like Gene Simmons, brought up in a close Jewish family, again with some of that kind of trauma in their history. His mother's family had fled Nazi Germany.
Again, a kind of troubled childhood. He had a damaged ear. The ear itself was deformed. It wasn't just, damaged hearing, and he got bullied quite heavily for it.
He actually changed his name from its original Jewish one to Paul Stanley. He grew up in a house where his parents listened to light opera and lots of classical, and he was very much influenced by Beethoven as well. He saw the Rolling Stones and the Beatles perform on TV in the States, and that really influenced him from a performance aspect.
Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley joined forces in 1970, forming the band Rainbow. Realising there was already a group by the same name, they quickly began performing as Wicked Lester.
Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley ended up in a band together after both being in various other kind of musical collaborations before. They ended up in this band which became Wicked Lester, and they got their big break when they were going to record one record with Epic.
She walks by moonlight.
They were signed very, very early to a major label, but just at the point where everything seemed to be going right, everything went wrong. Wicked Lester played just 2 concerts in their illustrious career, and after the second one, all their equipment was stolen. But no matter, because they still had a major label deal.
Epic didn't like the music or the image. Now that's kind of bad, because that's pretty much all you've got.
As soon as Epic Records heard their album, then they dropped them.
It was kind of a bit of a dead end, really, as the start of their musical career. And at that point, the two of them thought, we need to do something different, let's start a new band, let's try and do something with a different kind of musical direction and focus.
Simmons and Stanley recognised the need to find a simpler, more aggressive style of rock and roll, and began searching for a new drummer and guitarist.
Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley recruited Peter Criss. He applied after answering an advertisement in the Eastern edition of Rolling Stone. Now, the popular myth is that this advert required a drummer who, quote, will do anything to become famous. And obviously that's not strictly true. But when Peter Criss answered the advertisement, Gene Simmons said to him, will you do anything to be famous? And Peter Criss said yes.
Similarly, Ace Frehley saw an advert looking for a guitarist, and he went and auditioned. And I think the story is that initially they weren't too keen on his look. They thought it was a bit odd because he was wearing different coloured sneakers when he turned up for the audition. But they liked his guitar playing, so he joined the band.
And so Wicked Lester became Kiss, the band we all know today.
With the 4 band members now complete and a new musical direction in place, Kiss were officially formed. However, their rebranding would prove somewhat controversial.
They were driving around New York one day, and Peter Criss happened to mention that he'd been in a band called Lips. And this lit a little light bulb in Paul Stanley's head, and he said, "Ha-ha, how about Kiss?" And Kiss it was. Now, every good band needs a really good logo.
It was Ace Frehley that came up with the sort of iconic band lettering and the logo. Now, this was kind of controversial because the 2 S's look like the SS symbol from, obviously, Nazi Germany. I mean, it's almost identical in terms of those runic symbols. That symbol is actually banned as well in Germany, or certainly was banned at the time.
You know, for 2 Jewish people, one whose family perished in the Holocaust is highly unlikely. But they did concede and they changed the design.
The similarity was, frankly, striking. And so, in Germany and Israel and several other countries, Kiss's logo is very different to the one that we see in the United States and the United Kingdom.
Kiss are widely recognised today for their heavy use of makeup. But this wasn't something the band started out wearing when they began playing live in 1973.
So when Kiss first started gigging, they weren't covered in makeup, they weren't kind of putting this stage persona on. But slowly it kind of came into what they did on stage, and they created these cartoon characters for each of them.
Gene Simmons, I think, is meant to look like a demon. Peter Criss was the Catman. Ace Frehley was a spaceman. And Paul Stanley had a big star on his face. And so they had these personas, and I think this was the era of glam rock. It was all about looking androgynous. But Kiss were these working-class guys, also over 6 foot tall. And, you know, by their own admission, they looked like a bunch of sort of, you know, builders in drag when they tried to look androgynous, so it didn't really work.
They played a gig at a place called the Daisy in Amityville, and that was the point that they started to evolve, because before that they didn't really wear any makeup on stage.
The makeup was very unusual. Alice Cooper had done it, and he'd had success with it, and it made them more theatrical, it made them special.
By the end of 1973, Kiss became the first act signed to new label Casablanca Records, and had their official industry premiere at the Academy of Music, an event that wouldn't quite go to plan.
New Year's Eve, 1973, Kiss was supporting Blue Oyster Cult in New York. And during the song Firehouse, Gene Simmons had invented this trick where he blew fire from his mouth. This involved going off stage and filling his mouth with kerosene and then lighting it up and blowing the flame on stage.
Kiss very quickly realised that what they lacked in sort of musical dynamism, they could certainly make up for in showboating and extravaganzas, and they started playing with fire. And it didn't take long for him to set his hair alight.
Which, of course, was covered in hairspray and highly flammable, and so had this, like, incredible fireball moment, the first of many. I mean, this happened time and time again when he was doing his fire-breathing routine.
Gene Simmons effectively exploded on stage. The roadies had to rush on stage and towel him down.
Early on with Kiss, they weren't selling that many records, but their live shows were becoming like this phenomenon. Like, they were always sold out, and people were talking about them because they were so theatrical, because of course they had all the makeup and the costumes, they had like moving drum risers, they had Gene Simmons doing fire breathing. It was a really epic show.
Ace Frehley's guitar would burst into flames. Peter Criss had a platform and a sort of a drum kit that raised up and elevated. So the whole thing was much more like a circus show than it was a rock concert.
Yeah, people loved it. I mean, it's a spectacle. It's a kind of, rock and roll circus.